Welcome to another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan Myler. With me, Ryan McDowell and Matt Price. It's finally over, guys. We're past the speculation portion of the offseason, and we know where all these rookies landed. We also know when they landed, Ryan. A few slipped a little farther than we expected, and maybe a couple went a little higher than expected as well. But we have a lot to talk about for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It was a fun weekend. Lots of action, not just when it comes to the draft, but probably some topics you two guys might not want to talk about too much when it comes to the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. But we're going to have an exciting next few weeks with rookie drafts really kicking off and continued evaluation of this rookie class.
And we can take a couple minutes to mention, I guess, the Aaron Rodgers part of things, because that was the topic on everybody's mind, certainly the topic of all the TV minds that were out there. If you were watching the draft, there was a lot of speculation going on, and then it's maybe started as a rumor, but then was quickly turned into real news. And Matt, I definitely want to get your opinion on this. We're not really going to speculate on what's going to happen or anything like that, but purely from a dynasty manager standpoint, the Aaron Rodgers saga and everything that's going on there in Green Bay, how are you looking at Rodgers as a dynasty commodity right now? Because it feels to me like he's an MVP in a specific offense, and I know he's been an MVP in a different offense before, but he's obviously at his best now when tied to Matt LaFleur and the rest of those offensive pieces. It gets into a little bit of murky water if he were to be moved.
I think it depends where, because if we do, like all the rumors have been speculation to Denver, right? If that does happen, I think there's a strong argument that his weapons in Denver are quite a bit better than they are in Green Bay. New offense, new defensive coordinator, all that kind of stuff. But, Sutton and Judy and Fant, the running backs we'll see about with the rookie and Melvin Gordon. But, top to bottom in terms of what he has as weapons, excluding Davante Adams, you can argue that the weapons are better, I think. So for fantasy specifically, it could be a better situation.
Yeah, I guess.
You guys,
go ahead.
Sorry, Dan. Would you guys at this point be so aggressive as to try to pivot off Davante Adams or try to buy some of those Denver players?
I think it depends on the price for Adams, because I do see people panic selling right now. And, I think Adams probably will be fine if it's Love or whoever it might be. Aaron Jones is a little bit more of a question, I think. Maybe he becomes more of the focal point of the offense, to be honest with you, or LaFleur implements just that complete power running game and gets both running backs involved. But in terms of buying the Denver Broncos, I don't think so, because if it doesn't happen, I don't mind buying them, but I don't know if I would be extra aggressive, because if it doesn't work out, you're still looking at Drew Lock, right?
Yeah, I think that's too aggressive for me. That's what I was about to say. Going after the Denver guys is too much. There's probably the other side of the coin that for those of you that think Aaron Rodgers will mend the fences and things like that maybe there's an opportunity to buy Davante or Aaron Jones or any of the other targets in that offense. Time will tell what happens, fellas, and it's an odd circumstance. There's an MVP has never not played for the same or played for a different team the following year. It's a unique circumstance, and we'll see how it plays out. It's really unfortunate for dynasty players, because that offense was so dynamic last year, and hopefully they can get on the same page for all of us, because I think that's in the best interest for anybody that has Davante or Aaron Jones or Aaron Rodgers. We'll see what happens. We want to get into this draft, though, guys, because so many good things happen. Maybe a few things that we didn't want to see, some maybe tough landing spots, and we'll get to those for sure. The best way we thought to talk about all these prospects and their landing spots was to do it in a rookie mock draft. And we did one last week to talk about all these players and the potential landing spots. We did that one as a super flex draft. We thought we'd do single quarterback this week. We're going to stick with the PPR thing, but it'll give us an opportunity, guys, to talk about each one of these prospects, their landing spots, and what we see moving forward. So let's do that. We'll probably try to get through 2 rounds, maybe leave a little bit of time at the end to chat about some additional players. Before we get into the draft and the draft order this week, I'm going to take the first pick. Ryan, you'll pick number 2. And then Matt, you'll pick 3rd in this draft. We should talk about our general strategy and how we're looking at the overall field of players, where we think the biggest pitfalls are. We'll get into that a little bit during the draft. But generally, Ryan, when you look at this class and the draft order, how are you looking at how to attack one of these rookie drafts in single quarterback leads?
Well, the early consensus thought is certainly that the draft is not deep, that there's a clear drop after 5 or 6 players. Of course, depending on the format, if you are talking super flex, obviously that goes a little deeper. The more I get into the class, and we can talk about this as we make these picks and talk about specific players, I don't think that's the case. Even the late second round, I feel a little more comfortable than I did even a day or two looking at the players that might be available in that range. And then even comparing them to similar type of players or players that were in similar situations a year ago. And obviously that was a class that we felt really good about at the time and that has paid off. So honestly, right now, I think the class as a whole is being undervalued a little bit. But there certainly is a big drop after that top tier of, let's say, 5 or 6 players.
Matt, do you share a similar opinion, or do you think there's an opportunity to capitalize on maybe rookie draft fever at some point in that first round?
I think for me, there's really 2 options. It's get up into the top 4 in one quarterback leagues, or if I still want to take a bunch of shots, that's what I think we're talking about once we get outside of maybe the top 6 to 7 players is just kind of taking a shotgun approach. If you can't get up into that top 4, get a bunch of late first, early second round picks. And I think you can make enough shots there where you're going to hit on some of them, because there are some interesting situations. I just think once you get outside of that top 4, you're really looking at, a fair amount of question marks down there. That doesn't mean they couldn't hit. They certainly could. But if I'm going to take that approach, I want as many shots in that range as possible,
Sure. And I have a similar, I'm probably a blend of the two of you. I've thought the same thing over the last 24 hours, and we're recording on Monday night. We've had a couple of days, 2.5, 3 days to really process this draft class. Immediately, the 3 of us were part of a group that did a super flex and a single quarterback mock draft. And we were all kind of shaking our heads when we got into the middle of the second round. That's kind of subsided just a little bit. I've moved a couple guys up my rankings, a couple others down my rankings, and start to feel a little bit better about those lottery tickets towards the end of the second round. And then in the third round, those have always been lottery tickets and shots at a dartboard anyway. So there feels like there's some places that you can attack and potentially add some depth to your roster there. We're going to do this 2-round mock, so we'll get 24 picks in right now. As I said before, we're going to take a little bit of time to chat about some additional players at the end of our mock draft. I mentioned that I have the first pick, and I really don't want to make this a hot takey type thing, but the more I've thought about Kyle Pitts and his upside with the Atlanta Falcons, the more I feel like he should be the number 1 pick in single quarterback leagues. I've said many times on the pod that I feel like if Kyle Pitts was considered a wide receiver, he would be the number 1 wide receiver in this draft class. I like his landing spot better, honestly, than I like Jamar Chase's landing spot. Not really by a long ways, probably because the quarterback situation in Atlanta features an older quarterback, a guy that's 36 in Matt Ryan, whereas with the Bengals, Jamar Chase has the younger stud, up-and-coming, big-time starter with a big arm in Burrow. The thing that really differentiates things for me is the potential to have that positional difference maker. And we're not talking about a slight difference either. I think everybody would tell you that Kyle Pitts' ultimate upside places him as not only the number 1 tight end in fantasy football, which should happen, especially in Dynasty, inside of a year, but also potentially a top 5 startup pick. And when you have that, and considering the other elite players at the position, their ages, specifically Travis Kelce, the potential in as quickly as a year from now to have that kind of difference maker on your roster at a position that you have to start every single week. And, when you're playing against a opponent who might have the 10th, 11th, 12th, 15th best option at the position, that difference maker is a big deal for me. So I've moved, Kyle Pitts up to my number one spot in single quarterback in those rankings for rookies. And I feel pretty good about taking him at number one right here.
Yeah, he's definitely risen up my board as well. We talked about him last week, it was, I believe, or over the past couple weeks, and I think we were all kind of in agreement that at the very least he was climbing our board, and concern about taking a tight end that high was fading, and that's the case for me. I don't know that I would take him number one. I don't have him number one in my rankings right now, but he is number two. Behind the player that I'll take here. But before I make that pick, I did want to ask Matt. I kind of gave him a little bit of a warning when we were hanging out this weekend that I was going to give him a Kyle Pitts question. Matt, I know you've done the research. You've talked about this multiple times on the show, that for a tight end to really be successful, he needs to be one of the top two targets in his offense. Obviously, in Atlanta, we think that will happen in the next couple of years, potentially. Do you think Julio Jones and obviously Calvin Ridley being there is that a big enough barrier in year one? And I mean, we've heard Julio trade rumors, who knows what happens, but assuming those three guys are coexisting in 2021, does that slow you down or give you any hesitation, any pause on Kyle Pitts this high in a rookie draft?
I don't think so, because like you said, we expect Julio to move on, whether it's through a trade, the rumors we've heard, or just a decline in general ability. I don't know. I don't want to predict the demise of Julio Jones.
Sure.
But we talked about it a little bit. I think this is a little bit more of a unique situation. It's going to be a high volume pass offense. They did basically nothing at running back, so we've got Mike Davis there, and another guy that I want to talk about a little bit later. But I think there's going to be enough volume to go around, and I just and maybe it's just me with my head in the clouds, like dreaming of Kyle Pitts finishing tight end one in fantasy in his first season. But I just don't see how they defend him if they have the top two corners on Ridley and Julio Jones. What are they going to do with Pitts? A slot corner can't cover him. A linebacker can't cover him. They're too slow. A safety can't cover him. They're probably too small for the most part. So I think it's a very unique situation. And while the math and the data says that you need to be a top two option. Who says that he's not? Maybe Julio has lost a step at this point. Maybe Julio misses half the season again. And he has 8 games as the legitimate number 2 or maybe even the number 1 receiver, right? And back to Dan's point about him, if he was a wide receiver, he would be the number 1 in this class. It's who's to say he's not going to be used that way? Yes, the tight end eligibility is there. That's what we're going to be starting for him in fantasy. But if this team decides to use him as a blocker, and maybe they will for some regard in some instances, but I don't think this team drafted Kyle Pitts at 4 overall to use him primarily as a blocker. So while he can do it, he's going to be a receiver. He's going to immediately fetch targets, I think, for that offense. So the argument to not take Pitts in the top 3 because he's a tight end and tight ends take years to develop, I just don't think it necessarily applies in this particular situation. So I'm on board. I'm not sure if I would take him number 1, but I agree with you. He's number 2 with a bullet right now, easily over all the running backs and other receivers in this class. So yeah, no issue with that. You may have to wait a year, but even if you have to wait a year, I don't think he's going to be unusable this season. And I think there's almost no scenario where he's less valuable next year than he is this year.
Yeah, and most projections, it's going to be hard to find a fantasy football projection that has Kyle Pitts outside of the top 12. I think it's even silly to have him outside of about the top 8 or so, because there's so many unknowns beyond those top 4, and maybe you can throw a couple guys with upside if Goddard's able to have that job to himself in Philadelphia, and maybe there's a couple other names to talk about. But having him outside that top 10 is really an injustice to his talent and the upside he has in an offense with a quarterback that has shown he loves to use the tight end and loves to get guys the ball in the middle of the field, Matt.
We talk about, I think we talked about even several shows ago where, if you you're in a position to draft Pitts with a top 3 or 4 pick, why not just take that pick and trade it for Kelsey or Kittle, And for Kelsey, he's 11 years older than Kyle Pitts. I mean, I know we probably still have 2 to 3 years of elite production out of Kelsey. He's been the tight end 1 literally overall for the last 5 seasons and probably has the strongest chance to do it again, right? But at some point, we are playing Dynasty, and unless you are just the top of the top, you're a locked in 1 seed in the playoffs at this point in the off season. Like I think I would trade Kelsey straight up for Pitts at this point. And in one league I did. I moved Kelsey for the 103, hoping I would get Pitts there in a super flex league. That might not even happen now. So I think it's totally fair to trade any tight end that there is for Pitts. As soon as Pitts steps on the field, he's going to be the most athletic tight end in the league.
Ryan, we should move on to the second pick in this draft. You're on the clock there.
I will take the player that I do have ranked number 1 overall, who I would take at the 101. It's Ja'Marr Chase, the wide receiver from Cincinnati. They drafted him, obviously, with that top 5 pick. And even with the talented group there in Cincinnati with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, I think he's immediately the top target. Of course, that doesn't hurt to be reunited with Joe Burrow, their college teammates. I think Chase he's already a top 10, top 12 dynasty wide receiver. That might even be kind of cutting him a little short. So to me, these 2 guys that we've taken here are the top 2 options in dynasty rookie drafts. If you're talking single quarterback, for me, the running backs just aren't special enough. Honestly, I like them both. I like the situations, but I don't think they have that, that Saquon Barkley type upside that we were all chasing years ago to make me not take one of these pass catchers.
Ryan, do you think there's a teardrop big enough that if you're in the 3 spot or the 4 spot, you're willing to give up what is necessary to get to 2 to get one of these blue chip type pass catchers?
I probably would, because I think a lot of people still view Najee Harris as the 101. Yeah. I guess it depends on how you look at it. Maybe sure. You wait for that 101 to be taken. If that's Harris, then you sit and take one of these 2 pass catchers. That would probably be the way I would handle it. Obviously, that's league dependent, and the habits of the people in your league. Maybe you have a good idea of who's taking which player already. But if I know those 2 players are going in the top 2, being Chase and Pitts, then yeah, I would try to move up and get one of them.
I would as well. Matt, your thoughts on Chase at number 2, and then you're up at number 3.
Yeah, he's still the 1A for me. Like I said, Pitts 101, no problem with that. But if I did have the number 1 pick, I would probably take Chase at this point. So that checks out for me. And I agree. I would think I would move up. Another move I think you could do is you could wait to see if there is this thought that, and it's not a wrong thought, but the running back premium is enough to push both of those guys up to the top 2 picks. So the strategy could be, if you're sitting at 103, 104, is to just wait to see what happens. And then if one of those fall to you, take them. And if not, then you move that pick plus something else to get the player that you want. Because people still like to draft, so it gives them another opportunity to draft and to take another player and pick up an extra asset. So at 103, I think this is a little bit. I think, like Ryan said, Najee Harris is the 101 for most people, and I don't think Etienne is a consideration for many above Harris. In fact, I've seen a few safe league drafts go with Etienne falling all the way to 7 or 8 in superflex formats. So I think he has a little shine off of him because of the landing spot, because of James Robinson something there. But I think the nice thing about Etienne, who I am going to take here at 3, is that I don't think he's going to be nearly as volume dependent as Najee Harris is. We've talked about it before. He's the home run threat. So even if James Robinson is still involved, heavily, maybe it's a 60-40 split to begin with on the Robinson side, and it quickly flips, into the season. But even with a lower percentage of the workload, I think Etienne can still plenty productive for us in fantasy, right? So that's why I'm taking him here. It's obviously Urban Meyer's guy. They took him at the very top of the second round. They had if they didn't think they could get him there, maybe they would have traded up to get him. So I think they're very excited of them. Don't listen to the Urban Meyer talk about they see Etienne as a third down back, because even if that's the case, it's not going to take long, I don't think, for Etienne to separate himself.
I like that pick. I think most people, Matt, or a majority, I should say, not necessarily most, but more than half of the people probably still lean towards Najee Harris as the top running back in this class. And, Harris was picked earlier, and Harris landed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who everybody has gushed about for feels like forever. That's the ideal spot for the ideal running back in that system. What's the biggest differentiator for you that makes you give Etienne the edge?
I think if you're looking, oftentimes we'll draft running backs earlier in rookie drafts, even above wide receivers we like better, because you get that, that immediate production, you get that immediate value flip, right? So I think if your goal is to take one of these two guys and be able to flip them for more value, then I think Harris would be the pick, because I think year one's probably going to be pretty good. But I do think that there are giant holes in that offensive line that you don't hear too many people talking about. And we have to remember that Ben is basically on his last legs. We saw that last season, right? So maybe this is the last year, maybe he plays another year, but I think the long-term outlook for Etienne is a little bit better. And I don't think that necessarily the year one production is going to be that much worse. And again, it probably doesn't really matter for our purposes of how we treat running backs these days, but Harris is already going to be almost 24 years old, right? 23 and a half, I think, when the season starts, if I remember right. So, you're going to get, the burn is going to be a little shorter, I think, for Harris. And I know we'd like to get out of these running backs before the end of that contract anyway to maximize value. But a little bit extra age and a little bit worse offensive line and offense, and not in an exciting young offense with Trevor Lawrence taking over, right? So for me, that's enough to separate them a little bit. Again, unless I'm just looking to flip him quick after he has, a great first half of the season or something like that.
I'd actually I think there's an argument to be made that Harris doesn't necessarily have it's no guarantee that he's going to be more productive in year one, especially behind that offensive line who is it's just a mess.
It is.
Honestly, if they weren't going to go running back in the first round, there was a good case to be made that they should pick a tackle, right? Because Villanueva moved on in free agency. He's now in Baltimore. They haven't really filled that need. The interior offensive line was a mess last year the way it was. They couldn't run the ball in 2020. What makes us think that in 2021 they're going to be able to do it even with the upgrade at running back? So I have my concerns when it comes to Najee Harris in that landing spot, despite everybody gushing about it being the perfect fit. Now they could make some changes. They could sign a veteran. They did address the line a little bit in the draft, and there's the potential for them to make a big impact. But it's not rose-colored glasses, everything happening there in Pittsburgh. Meanwhile, in Jacksonville, and we've talked about this a lot in the past, Etienne, he just has that elite type of upside, that game-breaking speed and all those things that can win you a week. So there's the potential for Etienne to have even a better season. So I have Etienne higher than I have Harris. I'm actually not even going to go with Harris here. I'm going to go back to the wide receiver position. I have Jaylen Waddle third in my rankings. I love the landing spot. I clearly love the player. I've talked about him many times on the pod. It's very close between Waddle and this group of running backs, but I give Waddle the edge slightly because of his big play upside combined with that floor that I think is created with his speed and route running and landing with a young quarterback, other weapons already in place there in Miami. The offense while enough of it will go through him, I don't think defenses will put a big priority on stopping him early on until he proves his way. I see a path to a big time first season, and maybe it takes a little bit longer. I know there are some concerns about him needing some time to get up to full game speed in the NFL. Certainly his size is a little bit of a red flag or a question mark. Physicality could cause problems for him, but in that offense in Miami, I can see them moving him around the formation, using him on motions regularly, getting the ball in his hands in space, and becoming a big-time player for them early in their career. So in his career. So I see him as a value at 104. I know a lot of people have him at 106, right?
Yeah, that's a little rich for me on Waddle, but you know that. We've talked about him quite a bit already. I do like the opportunity for Waddle there in Miami. I think that's a great landing spot. Again, another player reunited with a college teammate. That's we've got three of those in a row with Chase, Etienne, and now Waddle. At 1.05, we've thoroughly trashed Najee Harris, but I'll go ahead and take him here. The concerns that you guys both laid out, especially with the offensive line and the overall play of Roethlisberger, are definite concerns. That's one reason that I don't have him as my 101. But I think there's some pros there. There's some reasons to be, excited, I guess, about him as well, because he's clearly going to get the opportunity. We know Pittsburgh prefers to use just one running back, and they've tried to find that replacement to Le'Veon Bell over the years with Snell and Samuels and McFarland and all these guys, and it's just never worked. So Harris is really going to have no competition in my mind. He showed his final season in college that he can be a weapon in the passing game. I think he'll get the opportunity to do that as well in Pittsburgh. So kind of like Matt said, I think even if you don't trust the player over the long term, I think you'll have the opportunity to invest in him with a top 5 pick, probably more likely a top 3 pick, and then gain some value on that over the next year.
Yeah, I don't want it to sound like we're all trashing Harris for sure, because there is upside in that offense and with that roster and all those weapons on the outside. Harris is going to run against those lighter boxes and have opportunities to take on safeties at the second and third level, which is where he shined at Alabama. They just need to shore up that offensive line. We've seen in the past that can be done inside of a year. So remember, the Colts were so bad a few years ago, and 1 or 2 drafts later, they were one of the best offensive lines in the league after a few good decisions. So Harris has that upside. I got to ask you guys, we're doing a PPR mock. How do things change for you? And Matt, you can start. If you're in a non-PPR league, in more of what they call a standard league, how high does Harris and Etienne go?
I still think they're 3 and 4 to me, to be honest. I still think I would prefer Chase and Pitts.
I think I would too. I mentioned it because I have Waddle at 3. Those are PPR rankings. If it's a standard league, I'm going with the running backs before I go with any other wide receiver after Pitts and Chase. Brian?
Yeah, I would agree. I'd have both Pitts and Chase still as the top 2 options, but then I would have the running backs next, as I do in PPR.
So we've already spent more than 20 minutes on the first 5 picks. We should probably start speeding up just a little bit. Matt, you're on the clock at 106.
Yeah, and just real quick, I do think that the consensus is that DeVonta Smith should go ahead of Jaylen Waddle, just seeing what I've seen on Twitter and talking with some people in some other fantasy chats. So I'm with you that Waddle should be ahead of him. But I don't think that's going to be consensus, at least not in this early stages. I'm not going to take DeVonta Smith either, though. I'm going to take the last running back that it has first round consideration, Javonte Williams, running back for Denver. He probably will have to be behind Gordon for a little while, but he was in a committee for basically his entire collegiate career, so I'm not really worried about that. And just because of the premium at the position, the question marks we have with pretty much every other receiver, I think, is enough to push him up up to 6.
I wouldn't argue with that at all. I have Smith above Javonte Williams. The draft capital is enough for me to make me think that that Smith is going to have a big role in that offense, and he's going to be used as he should be. I was a little bit concerned, but seeing him go as highly as he did, that made me put DeVonta Smith as my 6th player in my ranking. So I'm up at number 7. I'm going to take him right here. I know Philadelphia doesn't exactly have a great track record when it comes to spending first-round picks on wide receivers. They weren't able to get Rager going until late in the season, and even then, it wasn't a substantial, or he wasn't a substantial part of that offense. That should change. I think these two will complement each other a little bit, although there are some overlaps when it comes to their skill set. They want to be a downfield, big play making machine through the passing game. And with Hurts getting on the outside and using his legs to create time for these guys to get down the field, there's certainly a path to that offense being able to handle multiple big play makers and multiple downfield threats. I'm excited to see how Smith mixes in. Hopefully that offense and the play callers and that coaching staff can use him to his strengths and get him the ball where he has open field in front of him.
I think the concern for me with Smith is a volume issue. I just
Sure.
Is the Jalen Hurts offense going to be closer to Lamar Jackson's offense? I mean, I just don't know. I don't know if we've seen that level of passing ability from Jalen Hurts yet. And I don't think we can call it his strength anyway. So that's my one concern with Smith. It's not the body type. It's not any of that stuff. I think it's the volume in that offense.
Yeah, that's worthy of being mentioned for sure. I do think though that Hurts showed enough at the end of the season, and maybe that defense showed enough at the end of the season that Hurts had to push the ball down the field and make big plays. As long as that offense is in those kind of situations, I think Smith has the type of upside that we all saw on film when we watched him at Alabama. So we're through 7 picks here. Ryan, you're up at number 8.
Yeah, speaking of the Lamar Jackson offense, I'm going to take his newest wide receiver, or at least his newest top target, Rashod Bateman, the first rounder for the Ravens. Definitely seems like there's concern about Bateman and his value after he has landed in Baltimore. But when I look at that pass catching core, even including Mark Andrews, who really just struggled last year, I see Bateman, I don't know, maybe it's the rookie glaze, but I see Bateman as a guy who can go in and be the top target for Lamar Jackson really from day one. And I do think that has value. So this is the range I would be targeting him. For me, it's close between he and Smith in that 7-8 range. But looking over some of these names, and we've taken these players maybe in surprising order or what won't quite match consensus ADP. I think that's another reason this class as a whole is being knocked. That just the lack of consensus makes it feel like it's less than normal, that it's subpar. But to me, there's just a lot of options in this back half of the first round, early part of the second round that are just really close, that could go in different order. We're going to see guys like Elijah Moore or Kadarius Toney go in this range in some drafts and fall to the second round in others.
Yeah, and speaking to that, I think I'm on the clock here. That was the end of that tier for me. I think my next tier is 9 players deep, so I don't feel great about opening the can on this particular tier. I think any of these next 9 players could go in any order, and I have zero problem with that. But I'll just take my favorite here, and I'm choosing amongst these wide receivers. I'm choosing the connection with the quarterback, and the quarterback of these receivers, I think, is the best one. And despite his maybe limited role, and especially in year one, I'm going to take Rondale Moore here.
Yeah, I don't think that's a huge surprise, Matt. You've spoken highly of Moore and his skill set many, many times, and he did get enough draft capital that I don't think any of us are quite as worried. Picked in the second round, didn't fall to the third or even later, which some were concerned about because of that size and all the things that we've talked about on past episodes of the show. I like Moore. The landing spot is a head scratcher for me. There's other slot guys already there. It certainly hurts the value of Christian Kirk and his upside because, so many of us thought, well, if Larry moves on finally, Christian Kirk could move into the slot, which is where he should be mostly used. It feels like Rondale Moore is going to get lots of opportunities. That's good for his dynasty value for sure. Hopefully he makes the best of that.
What if
you take him here at 109?
What if the reason they didn't draft a running back was because Rondale Moore? Not that they're going to use him necessarily a lot as a running back, but what if they use him, as an extension of the running game?
Yeah, with those quick tunnel screens and all the things like that he did so well in college. We could see him used on jet motion and end arounds, those kind of things. Get the ball in his hands and an opportunity to make big plays. If that's the case, the sky's the limit in that offense with Cliff Kingsbury calling plays. The landing spot, I said it's a head scratcher. There's certainly a lot of upside in it. Hopefully he takes advantage of it, and he's the player that all of us envision him being. I'm up next. I feel the same as you, really, Matt. There's a big tier of players here. Lots of them are wide receivers. The next best when it comes to draft capital is probably Elijah Moore. He was picked with the second pick in the NFL draft. I feel like because of that draft capital, and despite maybe the landing spot and the black eye that is being a skill player in New York, I have to go with him right here at number 10. I have him next in my rankings. Again, very close to some of these other options that didn't necessarily get picked in the top 35 like Moore did. I still love his upside. I have him ranked higher than Rondale Moore, so I guess technically I would have probably taken him at 9, but again, these guys are really close.
They're right next to each other.
Sure.
They are for me as well. At the 11 pick, I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence here. And really what I wanted to ask you guys, I feel like we talked for quite a while about Jamar Chase, about Kyle Pitts. Basically sounds like we're in agreement that we think those players are elite prospects, and we're chasing those elite prospects. That's why we're valuing them higher than the running backs and higher than anybody else in this class. But especially comparing Trevor Lawrence to Kyle Pitts, in most leagues, those are those onesie positions where we're only starting one of each position. Why do you think there's not the push to take Trevor Lawrence as a top 3, top 5 pick in this class like there is with Pitts? Obviously, he's been viewed for such a long time as not just an elite prospect, but one of the best quarterback prospects we've ever seen. I would love to get him in the late first, personally.
I just think it's because it's so much harder to get elite production at tight end and at wide receiver. We have to start more of them. That's really my only answer. I have no problem if anybody wants to take him in the top 10. I just think for me in a 1 quarterback league, I can go out and get pretty decent production, guaranteed pretty decent production at quarterback a lot easier than those other 2 positions.
It really feels to me that this is one of the differences between a redraft league and a dynasty, or at least it should be. I think it bleeds over, that redraft philosophy that, well, you're only buying 1 year of a player. So all these quarterbacks, you can find they're a dime a dozen for useful quarterbacks that you can stick in your lineup and get good production out of. We regularly see guys like Kirk Cousins end a season in the top 12. So that redraft philosophy has bled too much into what we think in Dynasty, because the truth is you're buying Trevor Lawrence for 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years, who knows? And because of that upside, I think there is a case to be made as high as maybe 106. You mentioned 103 to 105. I would take the running backs and I would take those elite pass catchers ahead of them. But I think if you're really playing the long game and trying to lock up a difference maker, really, to me, there are 2 or 3 true blue chip prospects in this class. Lawrence is certainly one of them. I think Pitts is one of them. Some people may make the case that Chase is, and personally, I have Trey Lance as one of those blue chip type players. Beyond that, you got to be thinking in a smaller window, and those of us that are thinking in longer windows, again, you can make the case that he should be picked in the top 6 and maybe even the top 5. Matt, you're up at the 112.
Yeah, again, huge tier here. The receivers that I was looking at, there's one more receiver that I'm really looking at here in this tier, and the quarterback is gone. So it's tough. It's between one receiver and two running backs to me, and just because of the positional scarcity at running back, I'll go that direction. I'll take Trey Sermon here, landed in a great spot in San Francisco if he is used as the primary back, which of course is always a question in that Shanahan offense that likes to use so many running backs, right? So that is a little bit of concern, but of the rest of the running backs that are left, I think he profiles best as an every down player if he is used that way. So I'll take Trey Sermon.
I see the upside with Sermon as well. Ryan, I'd like to get your thoughts before we wrap up round one and head to round two.
Yeah, definitely like Sermon, the next best of all the running backs, and it's not really even close there. But I've got some concern in taking him here at this late first round spot, just because of what we've seen from San Francisco. Of course, we've seen the production, and that's why he's getting this value bump, I think. But we've also seen a committee, almost unlike any other in the league. Lots of comparisons to New England and the frustration that that committee over the years has given fantasy players. I think we're going to see the same thing. Not only are Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert still there, they also drafted another rookie running back after Trey Sermon, and they signed Wayne Gallman, who had a pretty decent year for the Giants last year. Not all five of those guys are making the team. I don't know who's getting cut. I don't know who's playing. Just the volume of backs there in San Francisco would probably push me to look at Sermon more in that 2-2, 2-3 range. Again, not way off where Matt took him though.
I agree with Matt that there is a positional scarcity, especially in this rookie draft, and Trey Sermon is certainly the next guy on the list when it comes to running backs. I tend to think more like Ryan that he belongs right around the 2-3. I have him 15 in my rankings, but again, this tier is large. You could really take any of these guys at any point. So round one is in the books. It goes Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Travis Etienne, Jaylen Waddle, Najee Harris, and Javonte Williams in the top 6. Then at 7, it went DeVonta Smith, followed by Rashod Bateman, Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore, Trevor Lawrence, and Trey Sermon. Guys, we should shoot through this second round. We want to splash in as much content as possible, but we just got a couple minutes on each of these picks. I lead things off at the 201. I didn't expect you to go with Trey Sermon, so I thought I was going to have to take the other 49er. I have one guy in front of that 49er, though. It's Terrace Marshall from Carolina. I know his draft capital isn't exactly what we were hoping, and a lot of people mocked him towards the end of the first round. Lots of landing spots like Tennessee, New Orleans, Green Bay, Baltimore. Instead, he goes to the Panthers, where he can play on the outside. He can be the other on the other side of DJ Moore, which is a nice thing. Certainly fits very well in that offense. Hopefully, the quarterback position gets taken care of. I think that hurts his dynasty value just a little bit, but that downfield threat in Carolina seems like a guy that he's going to have all the opportunities to become that. Seems like a value at 13 overall.
At 2.02, I will take that other 49er. I'll take Trey Lance. I'm just going to be the guy loading up on quarterbacks in this league, I guess. Dan, I agree with you. I see the upside of Trey Lance. I know I saw our buddy Sigmund Bloom pushing for Lance, not only to be drafted highly in Superflex drafts, but to be the 101 ahead of Trevor Lawrence in those Superflex leagues. Definitely always like to hear what Bloom has to say about these guys. Dan, I know you're close to agreeing with Sig, at least maybe have those guys on even footing. Just huge upside again in that offense. There in San Francisco. So I'll go with Lance here early in the second round.
I like that. He was next in my rankings as well. I have him at 13 overall and right behind Trevor Lawrence. I have him in the same tier for sure. Still have Lawrence just over Trey Lance, but I've said this on the pod before. There is a clear path with Lance attached to Kyle Shanahan to him being the best fantasy quarterback out of this class. And I think that's probably where Sigmund is going with his analysis there, that an offense and a quarterback in a Kyle Shanahan offense not only has that big play or big time upside because of his legs and through the arm with his arm. But he gets the ball out of those quarterbacks' hands so fast. They don't take all the hits despite being rushing quarterbacks. And that kind of upside doesn't exist all the time. We're talking about elite type upside because of the floor that's offered with his legs. I think his ultimate upside, I think his downside is probably a Jalen Hurts type player as far as comparisons go. I think his upside is up at the moon. I think it's Patrick Mahomes type of upside.
I knew you were going Mahomes there.
So, that he offered the same kind of big arm and elite mobility. Trey Lance is right there with him. And it's only that he played at North Dakota State that's holding him back. And probably that he didn't play last season. We're lucky to be getting him this late. He's certainly in the same tier as Lawrence. Matt, we got to get moving. Who do you got at 3?
Fine. I had a million things to say about Lance, but I won't.
Go ahead if you got a sentence or two.
No, not really. I see a sentiment out there that he's going to have to wait a year, and I just don't see that at all. I don't know where that's coming from. Are we really think they're going to suffer through another year of Jimmy Garoppolo?
Well, it'd only be a few games, right? He's going to get hurt.
I don't get it. He in some circles it seems like he still hasn't shed that project label, and I just don't understand it at all. I think the big argument is that he only has 300 career pass attempts or whatever. I don't care. I don't see it. When's the last time we saw it happen? I guess Patrick Mahomes was the last time, and he was certainly worth waiting for. So even at the downside, if it did happen, I'm still okay waiting for him. I would have taken Marshall with this pick, but he's gone. There's one running back and 2 receivers I would consider here, and again, I'll take the positional scarcity of the running back and take Michael Carter, who should, I know they signed Tevin Coleman, but it seems like he should be getting like 10 to 15 touches, even right from the get-go, assuming that Tevin Coleman can even stay healthy, right? So I'll take Michael Carter here.
All right, he certainly fits into this tier as well. I'm going to go to the wide receiver position at the 204, though. I'll take the guy with first-round draft capital, and that's Kadarius Toney. I know some are not thrilled with the landing spot, and even more, especially in the Dynasty community, are not thrilled with the skill set and the player in general. He has injury concerns and everything, but he is electrifying. I had him in my first round before seeing the landing spot. I still have a little bit of trouble putting Terrace Marshall, who is picked more than a whole round behind him, ahead of him in my rankings. Kadarius Toney, if used properly, is going to be a dynamic weapon in the NFL, and I think he is the guy that too many dynasty managers are sleeping on. This is a steal, in my opinion, at 16 overall.
I'll hit the snooze button and keep snoozing.
All right.
I actually thought you would take Toney above Marshall there with the 2.01, Dan. I knew you were a little bit of a Toney believer, so that one surprised me. At this point, this one probably won't surprise you. I'm going back to the quarterback position. The third guy here, I think, in this range, 2.05, Justin Fields. I don't love the landing spot. I thought he lost some value compared to some of the other possible spots at Denver. Not sure, really. If they don't get your boy Aaron Rodgers, I don't know what they were doing passing on him. I thought Carolina should have taken him. That would have been a nice landing spot as well. But in the end, he's a Chicago Bear. I think, like some of these other guys we've talked about, I think he plays right away. I don't think Andy Dalton is much of a anything that's going to slow him down at all. And again, Fields, just his athletic upside is huge in this offense. Easily the best quarterback Allen Robinson's ever had.
Yeah.
And what's nice about, we can all bash the playmakers on that roster. He doesn't have to compete for playing or shouldn't have to compete for playing time. It'll be a quick transition to him getting on the field, and we're going to see exactly this is a steal. This is a big time bargain. And in most drafts, it feels like a talent like Justin Fields would be that guy on the fringe first round that you get at the 202 or something, feel good about. To get him down at 205 or even later, that that feels like just a massive bargain. Matt, you're up at 206.
And just real quick on Fields, I think going back to our discussion on tight ends earlier in the top 2 targets, now that they have a quarterback there, I'm just saying I'm not a big Cole Kmet fan, but he could be surprising and a value right now. I think I just took him in like the 10th round of a startup. So
I like that.
All right.
I do think sorry, Matt. I don't know who you're taking here, but this feels like I think Fields was the end of a tier.
I've got one more
left. Okay.
I got one more. I got one more in this tier, but it is dependent on Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay, and that's Amari Rodgers. I think he has a chance to be, he's going to be the second option in that offense quicker than we might think. It provides that underneath option. Finally has one for Rodgers to Rodgers if Rodgers stays in Green Bay. If not, then this pick is probably not as great.
Yeah, I like that pick. The next guy in my ranking certainly would have taken him at the 207. He's one of the guys that I feel like gained some value. I don't know if it necessarily matters that obviously it matters. It doesn't change if Rodgers isn't there for me. He's still a mid-second round pick. I think he's going to be a big part of that offense. We're going to see him on jet motion. We're going to see him getting the ball in his hands in space. I think it definitely matters that he's attached to that coaching staff and Matt LaFleur, who loves to use those mesh concepts, which Rodgers fits into perfectly. As I said, I'm up at 207. We got to get going on this. I'm going to choosing between 2 guys, definitely a tier break here. I'm going to go with the second tight end. I'll take Pat Freiermuth out of Penn State. He lands with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's been known to use their tight ends. I like the landing spot. I certainly like the player. He's a field stretcher. We'll see what happens at the quarterback position there in Pittsburgh, but it seems like he has some upside and becomes a value right around here. I know our consensus rankings and many of the mocks that I've seen, many of the real drafts, even in the first few days of real drafts, have him going a little bit later. I think he fits in right here.
Yeah, he was going to be my next pick as well. So you sniped me on Pat Freiermuth. Instead, I'll dip into day 3 of the NFL draft. I think this is our first day 3 player. I'll go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Was surprised to see him fall so far. I do like the landing spot, at least from an opportunity standpoint. That depth chart is just so ugly. I can't believe they didn't invest a higher pick in a wideout. But St. Brown, worst case, should see some targets there in Detroit, quite a few targets, and be able to pay off this mid to late second round draft pick range.
Yep, he was my next guy. The one after that is Dyami Brown, Washington football team, across from, oh my God. Help me out.
Terry McLaurin.
Jeez, I cannot believe I just had that brain fart. Anyway, yeah, so plenty of targets to go around. Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to be slinging the ball all over the place, and Dyami Brown has that career, I believe it's for his entire career, over 20 yards per reception. So should be a good fit there in Washington and plenty of targets.
Yeah, I would have taken Dyami here as well. The next guy on my list is Nico Collins, picked 89th overall, got a little bit of the draft capital we were hoping for those of us who really like his talent. Again, he did not play last year. Before that, played with some pretty awful quarterback play. He's going to be a way better pro than he was college player. I don't love the landing spot to land in Houston and all the mess that's happening there. We'll see how that plays out. But Nico Collins, to me, seems like he fits right here towards the end of the second round. Ryan, you're up with your final pick of the mock.
I tried to give him to Kansas City. He would have gone a lot higher if he was a Kansas City Chief instead of a Texan. 2.11, just looking at the names on the board, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, they're in this range. I can't take another quarterback. I can't corner the market quite that badly. So instead, I will corner the market on Baltimore wide receivers, equally as gross. But I'll take Tylan Wallace, another player that fell a little further than expected. Baltimore doubles up with both Wallace and Bateman, a couple thick wide receivers who is really what they needed with that group of pass catchers there. So if Bateman doesn't hit for any reason, I think Wallace would get the chance.
It's such a shame, really, that he fell to 131 overall in the draft. We all saw him as a day 2 type player, and to see him not only wait until day 3, but then wait on day 3 for a little while as well. It certainly hurt his dynasty value. Feels like the talent is a value here at the end of the second round, but you can't love that landing spot for sure. Matt, you're up with your last pick in the mock.
Yeah, I'll take somebody who I think went higher than everyone else thought he would as well, but he did go in the second round, and it makes sense because the Seahawks always overdraft, right? So I'll take Dwayne Eskridge. I'm not sure quite where he fits in. He seems to be a little bit redundant with Tyler Lockett, and obviously another low-volume passing offense there, unless they're going to actually let Russ cook for the entire season in 2021. But intriguing as the final pick in the second round at the very least.
So that wraps up our 2-round mock draft. Again, we did this as a single quarterback mock. We're going to get into a super flex mock in the next few shows as well. We want to certainly touch on that. Let's wrap up the mock by just covering round 2 once again. I started things off with Terrace Marshall, followed by Ryan taking Trey Lance, and Matt going with Michael Carter. After that, it went Kadarius Toney, Justin Fields, Amari Rodgers, Pat Freiermuth, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Dyami Brown, then Nico Collins, Tylan Wallace, and Dwayne Eskridge finally. So we're through 24 picks, but there's certainly other guys worth talking about. We won't do the mock beyond this. After that, in my rankings, guys, Zach Wilson is certainly a consideration early in the third round. Chuba Hubbard, Kenneth Gainwell, Josh Palmer, who got some nice draft capital landing with the Chargers on day 2. Then Tommy Tremble and Mac Jones. Out of these guys, maybe any other names, guys, that jump off to you. Who's your favorite third round pick, Matt?
I'm going to go a little bit deeper, and they might not even get in the third round, but I just wanted to mention them. Jaylen, undrafted free agent for the Falcons, Javian Hawkins. It seems like he has a pretty easy path to touches with just Mike Davis there. Good receiving back, obviously very small, but if they decide they want to throw the ball to a running back, he might be able to get on the field. And then Jalen Darden to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There seems to be a little bit of a spot there with Antonio Brown potentially not coming back. I think he presents a little bit different of an element than Tyler Johnson would if they decide to use him as a third receiver, slot type guy. And he's also, I think, more athletic than Scotty Miller. So those two would be 2 deeper plays I'd be looking to grab late in rookie drafts.
Maybe you missed it, Matt, with all the news happening around Aaron Rodgers and the draft happening right before the draft. Brown did re-sign with the Buccaneers.
I missed it. My bad. Then scratch that one.
That's all right. Jalen Darden certainly has some upside. And going to the Super Bowl champs, that feels like a place where maybe he could make a light impact and build on it later on in his career. So he fits as a third and fourth round bargain. Ryan, anybody for you that really stands out?
Yeah, the only other player that I think hasn't been mentioned that we have to pay a little bit of attention to, little being the key word there, is Tutu Atwell, another player who got that second round draft capital. Not really sure how he fits in with the Rams. They already have not only a couple of good wide receivers, but also have Deshaun Jackson there, who you would think kind of plays that same role that they might expect Atwell to. But when we're talking third or fourth round of rookie drafts, if I can grab a second round player, really any player drafted in the second round, I would be looking to do that.
Yeah, Hubbard was a guy that I've liked a little bit throughout the process. He's going to fill the Mike Davis role, which is really clear backup to Christian McCaffrey, where there has to be an injury for him to get on the field. I think in short spurts, in a few games out of a season, if necessary, he could be useful to dynasty managers. Gainwell fits in as most likely a backup as well in Philadelphia. He's a guy that's going to go in the third round as well. And then I mentioned Palmer. I think he's a sneaky third round guy. Another guy that didn't play with great quarterback play, but has the measurables and all the skills. If he could get in the right situation and it starts to click, he could become a value. I mentioned a couple tight ends as well. Tommy Tremble went to Carolina, and then Hunter Long went to Miami. Those were second-day picks, guys that are going to go late in the third, maybe even in the fourth round of drafts, but guys with a little bit of upside. Fellas, we got through it. We made through the NFL draft. We did this mock. Any other thoughts when it comes to the NFL draft or the rookie drafts that are coming up? Matt, is there something that sticks out to you? I know we talked about strategy. We talked about most, if not all, of the players that we're going to care about in these drafts. What's on your mind when it comes to Dynasty right now?
Honestly, it's rookie auctions, not drafts so much,
Sure.
and how these guys are going to break out and just how much more expensive, like in a super flex format, how much more expensive Lawrence is going to actually be than Fields or Lance. And then, also the price relation between Pitts and those other top options. Those are the ones I'm really weighing right now, and how much more you want to spend of your rookie dollars on those really elite prospects.
I love it. All three of us love those rookie auctions, just like we love rookie drafts as well. Coming up with that tier-based system, I think it's really important when you're going into those rookie auctions. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, same thing. Getting excited about some of these rookie auctions, and I think it's going to be important as we get these early rookie drafts in the books. Really studying the ADP as always, looking for those teardrops, identifying targets within each tier, and then making the moves, before you get on the clock, before your draft even starts.
Yeah, very important. Good advice for sure. So we started off with Kyle Pitts. We got all the way to Dwayne Eskridge, got that draft in. As I said earlier, we're going to try to get a super flex mock in here as well in the incoming episodes. So be sure to stay tuned with us. For Ryan and Matt, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening to this episode of the DLF Dynasty Podcast. We'll catch you again next week.